The Dolphins are ending their week today by interviewing a man named Shula for their head coach vacancy. That and much more. You're on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say we live it here on the Locked On Network. Special thank you to each and every one of you who've helped to make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On NFL for $20 off of your first purchase. It's Friday. It's interview day for the Miami Dolphins and Chris Shula, the Rams defensive coordinator, grandson of Don. We're going to get a little bit into something I think is a little interesting with the Dolphins having an interview with Chris Shula today. Obviously, the Rams are still playing. They're playing in the divisional round, and they'll play the Chicago Bears this weekend. So we'll touch on that. Want to get into some quotes courtesy of Neil Stratton from Inside the League on Jon-Eric Sullivan. Want to get into the ESPN predictions for these coaching candidates, and I thought that was an interesting exercise that they did. And a reminder on where the Dolphins stand with their interview process as we get ready to get into the next major window of the head coach cycle, which starts on Monday. So we got a lot to do here on a Friday, so we're going to zip through it as best as we can. But the news came courtesy of Albert Breer. I have it up on my other screen here. Chris Shula interviewing today, Rams defensive coordinator, with the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Miami Dolphins. Those are the interviews that are happening today for Chris Shula. Chris Shula had requests for 7 teams. And as of right now, in the midst of juggling the playoff responsibilities and game planning and prep, at least as of right now, per Albert Breer, Chris Shula only has 3 interviews scheduled. Maybe he takes the rest of them. But I think it's very interesting that if Chris Shula is going to take less than half of the requests that he got for head coaching interviews, and the Dolphins are among the select 3, and your company to make the cut is Pittsburgh and Baltimore, hey, that's not a bad place to be. Now, obviously, there's a connection there with Chris and the Shula family and the Dolphins organization that has some ties that I know some people are ready to kind of just be hesitant on and say, let's not lose perspective and be focused on the right things versus the nostalgia element or the story element or the family ties. And what about the legitimacy of a candidate? And I think Chris Shula is a very legitimate candidate and should get a head coaching job this cycle. I think that should happen for Chris Shula. I know Pittsburgh, he's on their short list of reported names to have interest. But I think it is fair to question, like, having the last name Shula should not automatically qualify you for the job. I think that's totally fair and accurate. But I don't think that's where his resume starts and stops with Chris Shula. It is worth acknowledging as well why this stood out to me is I've been on the record as saying I think from the Miami Dolphins perspective, the GM vacancy was, I believe, an attractive one for GMs and general managers. For a coach, it's a little different because you're there on the front lines with the team. When you hire somebody to build the roster, you kind of understand, and it takes time to get those players in. But when you're the front-facing part of the leadership group and the head coach of the team, and you're responsible for putting the product out on the field, usually the leash is a little shorter as far as, you know, how much patience the public has with a coach. And with a coach, if you come in and 2026 is a transitional year, a reset year, an unintentionally bad or an intentionally, like, however you want to classify it. I don't think it's accurate to classify it as a tanking season or any of those things. You have to get the expensive older players off the roster, and you got to start the process of fostering healthy habits and team building now. But that's going to hurt when you take that Band-Aid off. It's going to sting a little bit. And for the coach to be out on the public-facing piece of that, I do believe it makes it a less attractive coaching vacancy than what it was a GM vacancy. And it works out for Miami that the only other vacancy in the GM circles was Atlanta. And they're barely doing interviews. They're working on coaches, right? And some of that's because there's a quarter of the league that has head coaching openings. Credit to the Dolphins for putting the gas pedal down, being prepared for the moment, rising to the occasion, and going through 2 rounds of interviews and hiring a top candidate for the job in 5 days. 4 days, really. I mean, that news came out on Friday morning, a week ago. That deserves credit. And taking advantage of the time of preparation to allow you to do both things and not be behind or not neglect one of your searches for the other. Now, Atlanta really doesn't have a ton of urgency at this point because they hired Matt Ryan to be the president of football. And, the GM is going to you're not competing with anybody else for GMs. So I get it from Atlanta's perspective. But Miami did well to get a very highly recommended candidate for their GM position in Jon-Eric Sullivan to now go about their head coaching search. And Chris Shula, selective with his time, put the Dolphins down, which I think is a pretty neat little notch in the belt because I readily acknowledge when you look at what 2026 is going to be, it's probably not a very attractive head coach vacancy. The things that you could use to appeal to a John Harbaugh, right, would have been the power elements, would have been the resources, would have been the financial spend, would have been control over personnel, whether that's the 53 or who you want as the GM. And when the Dolphins stayed the course with the GM hire and kind of setting the culture of the organization, some of that stuff went out the window. I get it. And I respect the fact that they have a process and they have things that they want. And you can hear interviews that Jon-Eric Sullivan's done in the past and get a pretty good idea of what he believes as far as team building. And I think those would be healthy changes for a team in Miami that for more than a decade has kind of been chasing short-term gratifying relevant payoffs. But I do think that means if you're going to be serious about the follow-through here, the kind of coach that you hire does matter. And don't expect a foundation-laying season in 2026 to have the kind of short-term gratification and payoff that's going to get everybody that big dopamine hit in the first weekend in January when you're playing for seeding in the playoffs next year, because that's probably not. Never say never. Maybe you catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe you hit a home run on a quarterback. Maybe you trade for a quarterback who plays really well. Never say never. But odds are the best 2026 will be the worst version of the roster in a 5-year snapshot from the last 2 years and the next 3 years. 2026 is probably going to be the low point because they have to get the books reset with the cap. Some cool quotes courtesy of Neil Stratton from Inside the League. We're going to touch on that next. Speaking of Jon-Eric Sullivan and the Dolphins getting a very attractive GM hire with a strong candidate, and that being a strong vacancy relative to the outlook of the coaching spot. We're getting into those quotes next here on the show. Make sure you guys stick with us. The draft pick positions are set. There's a lot of teams that are looking for their franchise quarterback. Unfortunately, it does include the Dolphins. If you've ever wished to become a pro quarterback drafted first overall by Miami, now you can. There's a mobile game just for you. It's called Ultimate QB Football Legend. In this game, you step into the cleats of a number 1 draft pick quarterback, and it's your job to lead your team to greatness and help turn a failing franchise into a dynasty. This is the number 1 QB career mode game on the mobile app stores, and it introduces the most realistic environment with full career control, where you sign contracts, train and upgrade yourself, build chemistry with your teammates, give input to your GM on roster moves, play the actual games in 2D, and then rise through the ranks. and become a football legend. You'll deal with the ups and downs of a quarterback career, from rookie nerves to playoff drama, everything in between. Ultimate QB is totally free to play. There's no ads. It works 100% offline. It's perfect for when you want to sneak in a game or two on the go. Head over to ultimate-qb.com. That's ultimate-qb.com, or search for Ultimate QB in the App Store. We do have a special offer for you guys. You can put in promo code Locked On in all caps in the game store and get a free boost at the start of your career. Ultimate QB football legend, QB1. It is your legacy. New year begins. A lot of people trying to simplify their routines, get a little bit more efficient. Dinner and meal prep's a good way to go about it. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, it's cold as heck here, packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference, and that's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. It's easy to see why. With over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices, there's something for everybody to help you save time and money. Home Chef customers save an average of $86 per month on groceries. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Inside the League by Neil Stratton. Daily blog, Friday, January 16th. Get to know Dolphins GM Jon-Eric Sullivan. This is a post that went up. And he gave a pretty cool tidbit on Jon-Eric that I was not aware of. Shame on me, as the self-proclaimed president of the Jon-Eric Sullivan fan club. He's twice been honored, in 2022 and 2025, as the winner of a Bart List Award for scouting excellence. Pretty within the scouting circles, it's a respected honor to receive, and he's received it twice since taking over as the vice president of player personnel in Green Bay. Neil Stratton, and it's succeedinfootball.com is the website. I want to make sure I give proper glow to here, because I'm going to read a few of the quotes that he provided courtesy of the blog from Neil. Reached out to several people who have worked with Jon-Eric Sullivan, and here's some of the quotes from folks that are in the scouting industry, in the player personnel industry, that have worked with Jon-Eric Sullivan. First of all, he's a football junkie, with his dad being arguably one of the greatest receiver coaches in the history of the NFL. And the things that he learned from being around him, he just simply knows football. He's a grinder. He works his expletive off, not only from a football standpoint, takes care of himself. He's a great family guy with a beautiful family, fun to be around, good energy. Quote number 2, incredible eye for talent, sees the big picture, outstanding at fostering and maintaining relationships. Most importantly, he loves, in all caps, football and is passionate about it. Does a great job listening while still having his own convictions. Quote number 3, he's a true football guy through and through, from coach to son to player to scout. This guy knows players and he knows ball. If given the time and proper supporting staff, he will be one of the best GMs in the NFL, no question. Honestly, this is long overdue. And the last one, obviously, great human being and evaluator. He does, but he's well equipped on the salary cap side as well. Green Bay does a good job training their guys in that regard. Not an indictment or anything negative about Miami's roster, but there's an emphasis on building culture in addition to the talent pool in Green Bay. And I'm sure he will take that with him. I'm excited to see how he builds the roster and who he hires as head coach. Let's hear what ESPN had to say. ESPN, a couple days ago, courtesy of Dan Graziano, gave predictions for all 9 teams, all 9 vacancies across the league. Many of these names you will recognize as names that are attached to interviews for the Dolphins. Chris Shula will be the team's 6th formal interview. And we're going to talk about the interview process and what still needs to be done on that front, as far as when you could start doing in-person interviews for coaches that are employed by teams. We'll get into all that. Okay. Klint Kubiak was somebody that the Dolphins had a request in for and fulfilled last Saturday. Kubiak was the first head coach interview the Dolphins conducted. It was virtually by Zoom on Saturday. The interviewing window is Wednesday to Saturday, I believe, for the coaches as the postseason rolls on. Kubiak was projected to go to the Arizona Cardinals by Dan Graziano. Obviously, John Harbaugh, the Dolphins did not have an interview with. It was reported that they had interest, but it never really felt like they put their gas pedal down and really threw themselves at John Harbaugh the way in which the New York Giants threw themselves at John Harbaugh. And they get credit for closing the deal, right? Like that's part of the process with the bell of the ball is you better bring it. Kevin Stefanski. The Dolphins did do an interview in person with Kevin Stefanski, and they were able to do so because he was fired from the Browns. So once you're fired and you're not currently employed by a team, you are not beholden to you have to wait until the Monday of the divisional round to do in-person interviews. Stefanski's projected to go to the Baltimore Ravens by Dan Graziano. Robert Saleh, one of my favorites on this year's market, projected by Dan Graziano to go to the Las Vegas Raiders. I think that's an interesting choice relative to they have the number one overall pick with Fernando Mendoza being the presumed number one overall pick, and them desperately needing a quarterback and being positioned to take one and going the route of a defensive coach. Now, I think it worked out just fine because, as we said on yesterday's show when we talked about tiering these guys, Saleh has all of that proximity to the Shanahan coaching tree to have offensive assistants that you should feel like we're going to be able to build a coherent staff. What about Mike McDaniel? Mike's been busy. Interview for the Ravens head coaching job recently. I'd be surprised if they go that route just because it feels like the polar opposite of the Ravens organization. I know Mike's obviously very speed, pace, and space. Kind of learned to bulk up a little bit this year with the sixth offensive lineman, but that was out of necessity. Would be exciting to see him with Lamar Jackson, but as far as the overall steward of the team, I'd be surprised if Baltimore went that way, and Mike just interviewed there. But the story from Graziano has him projected to go to the Browns. I could see this one. I think the teams that could viably offer Mike McDaniel a spot would be Tennessee with Cam Ward, the Cleveland situation being what it is. I think those are probably the two most likely teams for me to offer Mike McDaniel their head coaching position. Jesse Minter, the Dolphins did an interview with yesterday, along with Robert Saleh. These were all virtual. Dan Graziano projects Minter to go to Pittsburgh. Could totally see another hard-nosed defensive guy ending up in Pittsburgh as the head coach. Are there any other projected guys to land? And I'm saving Miami for last. Jeff Hafley. Everybody's favorite head coaching candidate to hate. And I do not hate Jeff Hafley. Jeff Hafley's on the list of a half dozen guys that you could tell me the Dolphins hire, and I'd say, okay, all right, let's saddle up, let's go, let's roll. I think there's a lot of congruency with Jeff Hafley's school of thought. You can listen to the Adam Brenneman interview that he does, and he talks about going to college and wanting to work with a group of guys and develop them for 4 years and really foster those guys and encourage them to grow. And liken that to a team with 4 years of rookie contract control at the NFL level. And I think there's a pretty good connection there. And obviously, Jon-Eric Sullivan's talked about the draft being the lifeblood of your team and building through the draft in that regard. And I think there's a lot of talent acquisition and development of talent that Jeff Hafley is probably aligned with. I think that's why he's a pretty persistent name in the Dolphins search. I would also say this team was top 8. The Packers was top 8 with Jeff Hafley in points, yards, and takeaways defensively in 2024 without Micah Parsons. Right? They faded down the stretch without Micah Parsons, and I get that. And Devontae Wyatt was out as well, and that's a legitimate critique. But anytime you lose the identifying variables of how your defensive structure works. Like Wyatt was the penetration guy on the inside, and Parsons is obviously the hallmark pass rusher. Anytime you lose those identifying variables, especially late in the year, like it changes how your whole defense functions. Like we remember what the Dolphins pass rush looked like in 23 with Vic Fangio when Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips went down, right? And nobody said anything about, oh, Vic forgot how to coach. It was, they lost like the engine of the unit. Because say what you will about the Packers defense and how good it measured for the first 12, 13 games of 2025, they didn't have Jalen Ramsey or Xavier Howard out there on the back end either. So measuring Hafley off the last month of his second year, I think is not the best representation of what he is as a coach. But it's also like I can only go through so many times where the Dolphins hire a coach and we're excited about it because the offense was ranked X or Y or the defense was ranked X or Y and he's so smart as a scheme guy. Like there are variables that do not meet the eye. The Dolphins, like Brian Flores as a defensive guy, Mike McDaniel as an offensive guy, play design and scheme was not the issue. So if there's a hole in a guy's resume because the two most disruptive members of the front seven go down in the final month of the season and the whole thing goes to bits and they still like him, I can understand why. I'm not going to say it's going to work, but I'm at least receptive. I'm at least willing to see how it goes. I think he's in a very competitive pool of coaches that are kind of all, it's you pick your flavor, where I think they all check similar amounts of boxes, as evidenced by the show that we did yesterday. Graziano's report here is off the rails because he had, not a report, I should say. It was a prediction. He had to Hafley go to the Giants, and that's obviously already done. That went to Harbaugh, although they still haven't signed that contract yet. Where does that leave the Dolphins? Where do the Dolphins stand on a hiring process? We're finishing with that on this Friday episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. NFL season is in full swing. There's nothing like being at the game, the crowd noise, the energy, the cheering alongside the other fans. Watching from home is great, but being in the stadium hits different. The frustrating part is always just getting tickets and getting in the door. You got to wait in queues. You got to deal with logins. You can't remember what your login is. You got to watch prices, make sure they don't change when you put them in your cart and go to check out. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. Choose what fits, whether that's, zone deals. If you like seeing kind of a general area of the section and you want to find the best deal there, or if you want to know exactly what your sight lines are, if you want to take all the guesswork out of the pricing and put all in pricing and you could toggle that on, where there's no surprise fees when you put the tickets into your cart, you can customize and choose what fits your process to buy tickets, and Game Time will help you do it. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. The NFL playoff push is in full swing. And so is FanDuel. They're officially in playoff mode every game day during the NFL playoffs. FanDuel is giving customers more ways to get in on the action. Right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. You can open that profit boost pack and find multiple profit boosts that you can apply to the bets you like the most. And boosts let you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. Lets you get a little bit more juice on those bets you already like instead of forcing you into something new. Make your picks, then apply your profit boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. Visit FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, and grab your profit boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Graziano at the Dolphins go with Chris Shula. Here's what he had to say. Too good, right? Don Shula's grandson coaching Don's old team. Going into this process, I felt very strongly that Shula would get a head coaching opportunity. I think he's right there. The Shula-Miami connection is too good to pass up, but the Dolphins' job opened. It's too early to know the eventual top candidates. Shula is well regarded around the league. Seems like there's at least one McVay assistant who always gets a head coaching job. Other known candidates included Kevin Stefanski, Robert Saleh, Klint Kubiak, and Jeff Hafley. Will it happen? I think you'd be safe to take the field. If I were to guess right now, I would guess that Jeff Hafley is going to end up being the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And I do think it's interesting. Like the Matt LaFleur thing is its own separate thing. And I don't want to spend too much time on the Galaxy brain on like a thing that maybe happens, maybe doesn't happen, probably doesn't happen, probably cooler heads prevail. But it is worth noting the reporting that's coming out of Green Bay this week is if Matt LaFleur ends up getting traded to another team, you know who they're going to probably tab to hire to replace him? Jeff Hafley. Food for thought. Here's where things stand for the Dolphins. The Dolphins will have completed 6 interviews, 1 in person and 5 virtual by the end of day today. That's Chris Shula, that's Jesse Minter, that's Robert Saleh, that's Klint Kubiak. Kevin Stefanski was the in-person interview. Who am I forgetting from the requests? Man, I'm going to kick myself. Dolphins. So they're doing Shula today. It was... Jeff Hafley. The guy who I just predicted is going to get the job. Jeff Hafley. NFL teams cannot hire a coach until they have successfully completed all of the hiring standards that are in place across the league. This applies to the Rooney Rule, right? And the Rooney Rule is intended to create more accessibility and visibility for underrepresented and minority candidates at the highest levels of responsibility at the NFL level. That's general managers, and that's also head coaches. Per the last update was 2021 was the last time they made an update to the Rooney Rule. You need to interview in person 2 Rooney Rule qualifying candidates. Okay, and it's worth acknowledging where the Dolphins stand on this. The only in-person interview that they have done is Kevin Stefanski because he's not employed by a team. Why haven't they done any others? Because per the NFL's hiring rules, you cannot do in-person interviews with any coach that is currently employed by a team until the Monday after the divisional round. And then at that point, if that team's season is over, you can conduct in-person interviews with those coaches. So from a Rooney Rule perspective, the Dolphins currently have requests for 3 coaches who qualify for the Rooney Rule. It's Robert Saleh, but if the 49ers win this weekend, you cannot host Robert Saleh on an in-person visit, which means like your ability to open and fulfill the obligations necessary to make a hire would be dependent on the 49ers losing. And if they don't lose, you then have to find somebody else to interview, or you have to wait and bring him in. And if you're going to wait and bring him in and delay your window in which you can start actually hiring a coach, when everybody's probably going to be rapidly trying to assemble assistant coaching staffs, you better be hiring that coach that you're waiting on, which is why I think it's important that the Dolphins do have 2 others, because the rule mandates that you do and conduct 2 interviews with the Rooney Rule qualifying candidates. Those other 2 candidates that currently qualify are Patrick Graham, who in 2019 was the defensive coordinator with the Miami Dolphins under Brian Flores. He's been with New York. He was most recently in Las Vegas for the Raiders, but he's been a long-time NFL defensive coordinator. And then the other one is Kelvin Shepard. I think Kelvin Shepard's going to be a great NFL head coach someday. I think it's early for him. And I think it is cool that, like, he's a former player in Miami. He played under Dan Campbell when Dan Campbell was the interim head coach. So a guy that had a proximity to Dan Campbell and saw what influence Campbell had on that Dolphins team and brought that team back from what that lifeless start of season was like. And him now coaching for Dan Campbell in Detroit. It's a really cool story for a guy to take an interview with Miami. But he only has 1 year of defensive coordinator experience. So I think it's probably early for Kelvin Shepard. But I think it's cool that This is a great opportunity for Kelvin Shepherd to have his name injected into these conversations about prospective head coaches. He's getting an in-person head coaching interview with the Dolphins. Once the Dolphins interview any two of those three qualifying candidates, at that point, they can they can finalize a hire, whether it's one of those candidates or somebody else. It is worth watching on the defensive coordinator front. Anthony Weaver's name, obviously he coached in Baltimore with John Harbaugh. Anthony Weaver's name has been attached to the New York Giants defensive coordinator post as a possible candidate to take that job. So as the Dolphins are going through their own head coaching search, simultaneously, Anthony Weaver may be in a position where like the Dolphins don't get a chance to choose whether they want to retain his services or not. Worth watching. It's where the Dolphins stand on the hiring process, where in-person interviews for candidates who are employed by teams cannot start until this upcoming Monday. So if I were Miami, I would have a very busy calendar on Monday and Tuesday. And I would make sure your top candidates, those that are going to allow you to be compliant with the hiring policies across the league, you get those guys on the books. Because you do not want to end up being, and I'm not going to say that the Dolphins are going to secure the first hire of the 8 remaining vacancies, but you don't want to be 8th. You don't want to be last. You do not want to, unless you're tapping into a very non-connected to the rest of the league hire, where the coaching assistants can come from untraditional places. Like the assistants and the attractive assistants are going to be in demand as well. And that is the next phase of this competition for the Dolphins. It's not only picking the right coach, but that coach being able to deliver an assistant coaching staff that is going to excite you and help to further the development of these players. And Miami should have some assistants on hand that are with the coaching staff that's been in place that I think are worth consideration to stay. Not all of them. I think there's some healthy change in some rooms that's probably necessary. That's where we're at. Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in here. Locked on Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys, as always, for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your Friday. I'll talk to you all again soon. We get news over the weekend. Maybe we'll react to it. Who knows? Keep it locked in around here. Locked on Dolphins. Talk to you all again soon. Fins up.